Hi, my name is Michaela Munda, and I'm going to be talking about my departmental honors project today that I've been working on. So my project is on a political scientist whose name is Samuel Huntington. He taught and advised on United States defense and foreign policy for over 50 years. He has 17 books that he actually has published, among numerous articles. But his 1996 book, The Clash of Civilizations, that was an article beforehand in 1993, is the work that he is probably most known for. So in this work, he wants us to really understand, and by us, I mean us, and in particular, he focuses on the leaders, the people that are going to bring us into this new era after the fall of the Soviet Union. So he writes urging us and whoever is reading, particularly the people I stated, to understand the factors that are going to set up the next stages of world conflict. And so I'm kind of looking at how some of those ideas are still talked about in today, how they're still lingering. But in his thesis, he argues that there are 8 major civilizations, and they're composed of general similar cultures, so Western Orthodox Latin America, Eastern or China, the Middle East, or he says Islam as well, Japan, and Africa. And he says that clashes between civilizations are going to be the forefront of conflict now. So in the Clash of Civilizations, Huntington really specifically examines, the United States and that part in that. So he examines the rise of powers in Islam in the Middle East and how he anticipated a clash there. He anticipated a clash with China economically as a superpower, and he also anticipated that immigration would be an issue moving forward. In Clash of Civilizations, Huntington specifically examines the rise of Islam powers in the Middle East, the rise of China as a superpower, and he talks a lot about issues that he sees with immigration in the future that he anticipates. And these examinations they seem familiar to us, because he wrote this in 96, but then you consider we had 9/11, the War on Terror. We're still kind of dealing with, China's rise in economy, expansion of their power. And currently we have a president and a number of people that also agree that we should be building a wall on the Mexican border. So these kind of ideas are, they're sounding familiar. And how Huntington really breaks this apart in his theories, he's like, all right, here is the reality. Here's the stage that we're set on. Here are the values that I and Americans hold true. So therefore, here's what I'm going to suggest. And so setting these things up, he suggests that we need to unite within our own civilizations in order to maneuver through the next era. So for the West, that means we need to go back to our roots of our civilization. And for that, specifically in the United States, it's our Anglo-Saxon Protestant roots. And so the concern with immigration is something that's not a new concern. It's with many, if not all, American presidents. Specifically, he quotes Teddy Roosevelt on this, who I think said along the lines of, we can't have too many cultures or they bump into each other. The goal of this research, as I said, is examining why these ideas he argued have lingered. Why are they still important? Why did he say those things in the 90s, and why are they still relevant now? What I mean by that is, they were relevant when the war with 9/11 and the War on Terror. They were relevant when we even talk about China today. They're particularly relevant in the way that we talk about Trump's America and conservative ideology. You see, because a lot of his ideas have been taken by conservative ideology. And then this poses the question, of course, so are his ideas conservative or were they taken? And the answer is both, because when you read his ideas and his suggestions, they do, in a sense, they do align with conservative ideology. Yet Huntington, in his perspective at the time, he wasn't writing this as a kind of conservative viewpoint. He was writing it as, he was a democratic realist, so I guess you could also say maybe a moderate. He wasn't writing it for necessarily anything. He called himself a Davos man. He coined that term, actually, for somebody that can step outside of their nationality, step outside of everything and kind of take a viewpoint. So his goal wasn't for necessarily any other agenda than the perspective that he saw was important, so the American agenda. And so, as I said, he saw it's the reality, values, therefore here's what I suggest. And those values are really what is being contested. Even in America today, we see that along the scale, people are saying we need to decolonize, we need to deconstruct these values that have been foundational to America. They are oppressive, we cannot have them anymore. But then there's also people that think there is nothing wrong and thinks that we need to hold on to these values and that we need to continue with these values. And so we see this spectrum of reassessing our values as a nation. What are they going to be? Are the foundational ones good? Are they still working? that kind of mulling through is the case. So if one takes issue with Huntington's ideas, it's not necessarily because they're conservative, it's because they're representative of American values. It derives from this disagreement, as I've said, this disagreement that we're having currently, that perhaps isn't new, but is very much on the forefront of our minds. Huntington, whether you agree with his suggestions and definitions or not, there's a very foundational idea that's very important that he pushes, and is that who I am and who you are, who your neighbor is, who somebody in the next continent or across the world is, that's important, and we need to understand that, and we need to understand the history, and we need to understand their culture and identities, and we need to understand that you agree with his suggestions, definitions, depictions of culture, any of that. He really wants you to think about, who are you? Who is your neighbor? Who's the person across the globe? And he wants you to understand that who you are, your perspectives, what makes you you on a personal, cultural, civilizational level, that is important, and that will be in the forefront of our minds in this next era. Carl Lazoda in the Washington Post, he had an article, The Prophet of the Trump Era, and he said something, Huntington changed the question. So in the Cold War, it was, what side are you on? But he changed it to, who are you? And that's really the defining direction that he gave. Interesting insight from Huntington is that ideas don't necessarily belong to anyone or anything. Once an idea is released or sent out and it's either acknowledged or taken upon, you have no control how that is going to shift or move, because we have no idea how our history is going to keep moving. We don't know where it's going to go. As I said, where he stood as a Democrat then is not the same as it is now. And how he uses history, how he explains history then, is from his perspective as like a white American cis man. And now our history is expanding in perspective. It's multifaceted, where his is not. And these are big changes. How his ideas have changed are very representative, and how his ideas have changed are representative of how we are moving. So that's what I've been working on. This is definitely a work in progress. I'm still finishing this. I still have time left where I'm still really working through this. So any comments, any thoughts, any suggestions, any questions especially, I would love to talk about them. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much, Nurith Zmora, who has been helping me throughout this process. And thank you.